Good to see you again. I know it's been a couple of weeks here, but excited to see you and see how everything's going. I like your new
Well,
setup.
yeah, a lot of people knew that you weren't feeling so good and asked me about it when I was in Escondido and when I was in Washington. So, how are you feeling, first and foremost, since we're all
And
friends
tough
here?
battle, tough battle back, but I'm getting there. This is going to be kind of a long process, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. Oh my gosh! Since I was down for several weeks here, I've been doing a lot of research. I've had some really good breakthroughs, and so today I want to talk about that Terrence Howard that he did on Joe Rogan.
Okay, great.
So I did some research on some of the stuff that they were talking about. So I'd like to kind of talk about that. If you do, I have share my
Yeah,
favorite.
all set.
Everybody, this is how you get a hold of me. And I want to thank everybody. I did get a bunch of people reaching out to me, asking me how I was while I was away on break. And also I want to give a quick shout out to Paul, who's been organizing all of our shows that we've ever done, put it in a list, and it's converting them so you can actually get a text of my presentations.
Wow, awesome.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
The
How
hours that
cool.
this individual has spent has to be crazy. We have a lot. We've done a lot for the last 4 years. Yeah, he's done a great job, and he keeps giving me
Cool.
updates of where he's at. And so, a quick shout out to him, guys. Keep it coming. I've been getting a lot of really useful information, and I've been doing some deep diving on some new topics. So, and we've had some breakthrough. Next session, I got to show you some incredible research we did on water. Yeah, that's definitely a resource grab.
Yeah.
What they're doing there, and I know this is off topic before we get into it, but if you look at all the land that they've been acquiring and burning it down, but another thing that I do want to mention since you brought that up, one of the risks that we're running into right now also is a lot of the seedless fruits and vegetables that they're providing. Without the seeds in those fruits and vegetables, I know that they say, oh, that they're in there.
Right.
You could potentially run out of resources by not having those seeds in that, because that's the seed of life, which will actually kind of be nice because we're going to talk about that. But you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
there's a risk there between both bioengineering of our products that we eat, as well as taking away, they're making it seedless and different things. So we as individuals would not be able to produce this on our own without access to those. Now, it would take them time to do that,
Wow.
but that's the direction that we're heading. Yeah, that's actually, I think it's like Switzerland. It's up in
Of course it is.
Iceland or something. But
Of
but you are
course.
correct. They have one of every single thing up there.
I don't know why these people think that they're entitled to do that, but we got to keep getting the message out. So I look forward to that as well. You've been
Yeah,
busy.
that's going to be a fun one. We're going to have a lot of fun. Been having some breakthroughs. So I want to talk today. I want to talk about this guy, Terrence Howard.
Cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So this guy goes on Joe Rogan and he starts talking about periodic elements. He challenges the mathematics and different things, and he got huge backlash on that, right? And it was crazy. And I want to talk about it, but I don't want to talk about him in particular. I want to talk about his subjects. So what I did is I went and did a deep dive into some of the things that he was saying. And so I want to kind of talk about that a little bit, if I can today.
Great. Yeah, sure.
We'll make it very interesting. And it's nice to kind of get a sidetrack with all the craziness going on in the world. So
I agree.
a nice little diversion, I thought. So this guy came out and this guy started talking about, he presents the Walter Russell periodic table of elements. But I want to stress that a lot of his research or a lot of his statements are based on Walter Russell's book, The Universe One, which is interesting because we've had other books that are very similar reference that we've talked about in other shows that always kind of talks about the same. So anyway, in there, he talks about the periodic table of elements, and then he goes on and highlights specific things where he talks about that the universe is continually in a continuous motion, which we've talked about many times as well, about that energy, everything is based on energy and light. And so, and then later in the show, he introduces the flower of life and he talks about that, which we're going to talk about today. When he did that, though, all hell broke loose. And a lot of experts, the industry experts, attacked everything that he was saying on it, said it's falsified. And I want to bring this up. I'm not going to say who this was. We won't do that. I need to move you again. So, and basically what they said is if you're a fan of a particular subject, it's possible to know just enough about that subject to think that you know it all, but not enough about the subject to know that you're wrong. And it's a valley of self-confidence. And they even take it one step further when they were criticizing his work. Now, granted, I agree with peer review. We should always have peer review. But when your arguments are based on, in my opinion, flawed laws of physics, we continue to prove over and over again that these solid laws of physics are wrong. They're not bending. We need to look at each of these individually. And that's really what he was doing, is saying, hey, listen, this isn't the first time we've gone back to old books and realized that they were right. So we're going to get on that roller coaster again. So they talk about this thing, the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this is the argument where it's really in my opinion, it's an individual's way of saying, I'm right, you're wrong, and you're ignorant, basically, is really what some of the professional physicists had said to him in his work. And I like to see that. So basically, the Dunning-Kruger effect basically says you have two factors. You have competence, level of competence, and your competence. And I love this thing up at the top here, where you have a high level of competence, but your competence or knowledge base is so weak that it's called Mount Stupid. And then it drops your level of confidence down, and you start to learn more. There is a certain degree of truth to that. However, what he did was he was looking at what Terence was doing is he was really looking at Walter Russell's information, and he was elaborating on it. I mean, he's got like 96 patents. So, I mean, the guy is taking it to the next level, and I highly respect that. And so what's interesting, actually, and this is actually a note that I put in here so I wouldn't forget, but one of his patents could be leveraged into a medical healing device. One of the things that he talked about in one of his patents on a core technology, if we added, and this is the science part of me talking, this is the nerd mic, if we added additional neurosynaptic stimuli utilizing one of his platforms and another one that I think that we could use, merge those two together, we could create a healing device.
Wow.
So this guy actually, when he was looking at these things, and his patents, some of these patents were back in 1995, way ahead of his curve. So, this guy's not completely off the chart on this thing. The guy's not off his rocker. He was onto something, and he predicted where the gaming industry was going in some of those patents, but he also had some other ones that were biologically linked as well. So actually, kudos to him, because as I was working on one of my projects, I was looking at his patent, and I realized that one of his patents could be leveraged and used to heal individuals. So it's actually kind of cool. And that's exactly why I kind of diverted, and I wanted to talk about this specifically coming out of the gates on my first show and after a couple of weeks, because you have to always challenge science. And if you go back and you have these experts that have 75 initials past their names, and then I'm right, you're wrong, you're ignorant, we're not going to proceed as a society. And so I thoroughly researched these things, and I think that we need to look at it. I liked his healthy approach. Here he did exactly what we try to do. We take what we're learning, and I expose it to as many people as possible. And then I get people sending me text messages, emails, or different things saying, hey, let's talk about this, which is awesome.
Right.
That's exactly what it is. So let's dig into this book a little bit.
Great.
So one more quick note. He also does what he calls tangential flight. And you should look this up. He's got a company. And basically what he's doing is he's doing a version of a 0-point gravity.
Wow. Using
different vector trajectories. It's actually very interesting what he's been able to accomplish. And he's been able to scale this up as well, by the way. I found this absolutely fascinating. I have too many experiments, so I can't do any more with this one. But I actually really like what he's come up with here. It's actually brilliant. So in his show, they bring up this, and this is the periodic table of elements. Now, I want to stress, this isn't his work. This is from the book, and it's just a colored version of it. But what's very interesting about this, Mel, so this is the periodic table of elements that normally people see in the chart.
Right.
So what this is saying is this is based on light, frequency, and energy. All the elements are. And what he's saying is that there's a continual motion. So every one of these are elements that go back on. They're created and they ultimately destroy themselves, and they can continue to go on. Whether you combine those or not, it doesn't matter. That evolution and de-evolution continually happens over time. So what's interesting about that is in his book, Nikola Tesla actually told him, he knew him. These two scientists knew each other. And he's told, take your theory in your book and put it put the brakes on it for 1,000 years, because our society, meaning the human species, is not ready for this right now. Because this goes back to the links. Remember we talked about the pendulum?
Yeah.
This is the next level. As a matter of fact, as I read and did some really in-depth research into this in another book, what's interesting is the CIA missed this book. Had they had this book, they would have propelled themselves even further in advance, had they known and understood this book, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So this, I want to mention a couple of things on here. So
Right.
What he's talking about in terms of this movement and the elements is basically, one more quick point on that is when we visually see an element, well, let's say it's carbon or whatever, when we actually are looking at it in a microscope or different things, all we're noticing is its current step in that phase. So, time is irrelevant in this consideration in this quantum world. Is when you're visually and consciously seeing, let's say, water, H2O. Let's just use that as an example. When we see H2O and we look at it under the microscope, or we look at it, we're only looking at it at that current point in time, but it evolves out and back in, and we're only seeing it in that one point. Now, if you look at a chair is actually an energy at a very dense level, right? But over time, if you take time and you look at it, eventually everything will break down. So it does do that full circle. It just, certain things are more dense than others. And what we use to understand that is we've always used the concept of time. But when you pull time out of this and you look at this differently, then all of a sudden you've opened up a whole new world, taking time out of it. But I want to mention something. So this is interesting. This is the current version of the Russell periodic chart of elements. And this is really hard to read. It's even hard to read actually when it's not printed, because there's a lot of information on here. But what's interesting also, though, Mel, I got to move you. You're driving me crazy. All right, there. So one thing that Walter Rusher stressed throughout this book is light is the power of which God uses to create the appearance of form. And then we simply interpret that. So this is based off of the concept of light and God. Now, this is a scientist. But the reason I wanted to show you this is this isn't his original periodic chart, because there were 5 elements that in his book, I have one of the original books, and it has 5 elements that he predicted back in 1910 that we would eventually, once technology was advanced enough, we would find that element. And sure as hell, we did, right where he said they were going to be, and right in line with this current periodic chart, which is amazing. So this is the new version that everybody sees out in the public. This one here is a copy of the original from my book.
Oh, wow.
And in here, he states that there are 5 additional elements that, based on current technology, these elements cannot yet be identified. As of right now, we have identified all 5 elements. So this is the opening chapters of this book, and a lot of people thought that he was off his rocker. And then you even look at up to this current day, everybody says, oh, this guy's Terrence is off his rocker on this thing. But he predicted that when we are advanced enough, we would find these elements when we had the technology to do it. The other thing that he does is this spiral technology where he's talking about like hydrogen, and he has these bases that are at perfect octave, or in sound would be a perfect frequency. And that's when you have the core set of elements that you use to make things. Carbon being one, hydrogen being the other. But hydrogen we're only seeing hydrogen in its true form. There's an exact opposite of hydrogen at the end of its de-evolution before it again starts to create. Now, why is that important? Because this also applies to electricity. And so the concept of energy and creating of energy in the ether, which we've talked about before, and how we can, the normal physics formulas don't account for additional energy that's being thrown in. This is completely aligned with that exact same concept. It's dead on. So that's what's so exciting about this. I know I get excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
So in here, I kind of blew this up so people could see this a little bit. Now, this is the book, so it's an old book, so it's kind of out. But here are the 5 unknowns that he identified in the chart. One being right here, one being down here in this one, and these were the 5. So then what I did is I said, okay, that's interesting. This is the one that we're looking at now. Where do we fit in? And sure enough, it does. So if you look at this one right here, under polonium is astatine, excuse me. And then here on the 9th octave, he also identified under titanium, hafnium. So he predicted in his book, hey, I know there's an element in there. I just don't know, and I don't have the technology to identify exactly what that is. You guys can come up with whatever your name you want. Until then, I'm going to call them unknowns, but you will find them. And sure enough, every single one of those elements have now been identified.
Wow.
So right off the bat, as I started looking into this book, it already validated itself for me to continue to do my research into this. And I thought it was really worth bringing to the public to learn about this. Another key point that he talks about, which is the second book of Walter Russell, which I'm not going to talk about, is he talks that he challenges the current concept of math. But his arguments and what he presents to society is based off of Walter Russell's original work. All he did is take it to the next level, which again, I commend him for doing that. And it creates an environment of what I call the what if. And the what if is, well, wait a minute, if we know this, then what if we do this, this, and that? And that's exactly, your comment is 100% accurate. I believe that we're in that position because, in evolution now, we've questioned everything, and we're going to have to start to break down what isn't working and what shouldn't be there. And then that's going to open up a million opportunities. This alone, and many of my other shows, people can take this and go to the next level. Right. I'm still pressing that free energy thing, and we'll get there.
And before this whole period, we've been working together for 4 years. People didn't even really question the science or the journals or the FDA or any of the agencies or whatever. And now everyone's questioning all of them, which is a great thing, I think, for humanity, that we are popped out of the people that control it all are right. And any questioning of them is insane. Now we know, no, we should question everything.
Absolutely. And this is a perfect example of that. And let me show you really quickly.
Great.
So these are the other elements. Now, these are the ones more towards the bottom half of the periodic chart, which would have been more difficult to identify compared to the others based on its density. But as you can see, we have actually found the ones that he identified that were missing in this chart. So he was way advanced, a century ahead of his time, and he was smart enough to know that something should be there. We just can't figure out where, and we're now to that point, which I think is amazing. And so this is exciting. But I want to go into the book a little bit more. Cool. In terms of the science of it. So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. I'm like, okay, the first 4 chapters is pretty interesting, and I'm going to buy it because I know, how is this going to work? And my first, as a scientist, And having also a degree in chemistry also helps here, not just biology, but chemistry. I says, okay, well, let's look at when we're going to take sodium chloride, for example, NaCl, and put that together. How would that fit in this periodic chart? And because this is so simple, although it looks really complicated, right? It's actually not. It's very simple. Something evolves. It reaches its maximum potential, then it simply degrades down to zero, its exact opposite, and then comes back around and recreates itself. We only see it at that point in time, but there's other things that are happening at that point in time. And it's very simple in concept. So to summarize what all of this would do is electrically generated elements and magnetically radiating lines of force that we just saw there are the same force exerted in opposite directions. So there's a couple laws that we need to understand from this book. Radioactivity is the lowering of potential into higher octaves, the octaves ones that you saw on there, they say octave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, of elements of greater speed but less power. So what you're doing is, I gave an example here of what does that mean? If you compare a horse and a rhino, right? Mm-hmm. A horse is obviously much faster than a rhino, but a rhino would clearly have more power and it's stronger. So if you look at that, the rhino is giving up speed for power, and the horse is vice versa. All that is an exact opposite as you go through the circle. And that's exactly what that means, is you're giving up speed or power, but at one point, they become exact opposites of each other. One here, one here. So as it evolves, it comes back, I'm the exact opposite, then I'm going to come, and now I'm at the speed point. So it's always one or the other, and it always balances. At any point in time, there's always an opposite. Yeah. That make sense?
Yeah.
Did I explain that?
It makes sense. It's just like, I love that.
I know.
I love that we're having these conversations. It's
mind-blowing, I know. And what I'm trying to do also, so everybody can understand that, I'm trying to use very simple examples, but that is a perfect analogy of exactly what he was saying as one of his laws within this book. And to the next one is general activities, increase the potential into lower octaves of greater power or lesser speed. So basically what that means is general activity is the building of the element to its highest potential. And the radioactivity, it tears it apart, radiation. It breaks it down. So once it's hit its highest octave or its highest peak, it will degrade and go back down to its opposite again. And then once it's its exact opposite or zero, what does it do? It goes back and builds up. Everything is based on this. Well, that's actually a very key point, because if we understand this at a higher level, and as we look at this, any element, how we have these gold mines, we have these lead mines, we go into this, we wouldn't need them. Because if we truly understood what these are, you could take any potential piece of energy or light or energy from its negative point and bring it into its current state. You could create any potential metal out of nothing if you truly understood this concept. That's what you would do. It's mind-boggling. It's completely mind-boggling. And so to continue on, I'm going to give another example here. The law of the universe of motion is generative and degenerative, as we just talked about here, which applies to all particles. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is we wouldn't have to mine for these things. We would be able to create them. Wow. If we understood this concept. That's what's so amazing about this. And so the next question would be that, okay, well, Mike, that's awesome. Let's use a different example. And let's look at a tornado. So this is directly out of his book as well. As you talk about now, by the way, gravity is a law or a force, but it's not as we understand it. And Terrence Williams and his little flying machines is a perfect example of him understanding this concept well enough to know that gravity does not affect. He has zero gravity in the center of those little flying devices that he has. Zero gravity.
Right.
Now, if you look at these UFOs that you're seeing that are flying around, and they're ours, right? But those are anti-gravity. They use a different approach to the same thing. But what he's saying is, okay, I can beat the law of gravity. However, what's important here is these two spiral lines are exactly opposites of each other. So when you see a tornado and it goes down, the force continues to go stronger as you go up. But what's interesting is, what you don't see is that there's an exact opposite tornado on the other side, because it's the destructive portion. So you have disintegrating as well as integrating. So the spiral down will continue to create more and more force and power till it's reached the epitacle or its highest potential. But at the same time, it's spiraling back out. The exact opposite is going out the other way. And see, that was back in the 50s, right? So it's very likely that they...
Your favorite years when
Yeah, my favorite, right? It's very likely that they stumble. But here's what's interesting about this too, is in a current application of this, and I'll have to find the source on this. An individual took two sound devices and they put them probably about 4 or 5 feet apart. And they created the exact middle or the exact zero potential between those two energy waves they're not waves, they're pulses. Sound is not like this. Sounds are pulses as they come through, like this, right? At the exact middle of those 2 points, if you take an object and you put it up, it creates an upward energy and it can float. Wow. Because at that point, it's its highest potential and there's zero gravity. It's been proven.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. So this is really exciting. But the example that I want to use in terms of understanding the spiral is, okay, well, the tornado. So the question is, Mike, okay, well, tornado's great and I can understand that. What else? But the problem is it's pretty much everything else. So if you look at the formula of lock potential, basically every single thing that he talks about, whether it's sound frequencies, energy, or anything, is based on this. And all this is maximum potential to zero state to the exact opposite. Everything is, if you look at that periodic chart, that's all that is. So if you look at helium, for example, or hydrogen, excuse me, look at hydrogen. When we see hydrogen, it's right here. But at that point, when we see hydrogen, there's an exact opposite. And he actually came up with names of them.
Wow.
What that would mean, though, is you could take something from here. If you had the technology, you could take something from here and you could bring it all the way over to here and you could create it.
Wow.
Sodium chloride, gold, lead, copper, all of it. If you understood this concept and we could come up with some type of, first you have the concept and the understanding of it. But once you've mastered something like this, it's when you can reproduce it and create it. Yeah, and this completely undermines that exact same thing. And
I love
another thing that, if you remember back in the 70s, when they said, we're going to run out of gas and we're not going to have anything. Well, what they didn't take into consideration there was technological advances. So you wouldn't run out of a resource because technology will always be ahead of a resource. Now, what this does is this undermines all of it. What this is saying right here is this is saying you can literally create something from nothing. The nothing is just something we can't see or we don't know, period. So let's go a couple more here, and then we're going to have to come back and revisit this. However,
yes.
Does really true? Well, what this also does take into consideration is sacred geometry, because when you look at sacred geometry, it uses the same concept.
Wow.
It's identical. If you look at, and we haven't talked about this in a while, but Victor Schachberger's anti-gravity.
Right.
It's the same damn thing.
Wow.
Right. It's identical. And if you look at the map of harmonic sequences, it's the same thing. But it goes even farther than that. Is if you look at this is why physics, science, biology, and chemistry are all overlapped each other now, because we now realize it's all the same damn thing. There's no guy gets a degree, a master's degree in chemistry and biology and whatever. This now completely forces science, all sciences, to step back and, well, wait a minute. I always thought like astronomy, for example, they put that into science, and I was like, why are they in here? They're really not. Well, sure as shit, look at it. It's because it's all the same. And that's what's, to me, is so mind-boggling, is the fact that even you look at the Mona Lisa and many of these other ones, and by the way, there's an exact example of this also is the Pyramid of Giza's with the lion that sits in the middle. It is perfectly symmetrical. Okay, so basically the universe of one basically is saying many things that we have said before, where all the sciences are one. But more importantly, in this particular one, they really broke it down in saying that once technology advances and we understand that everything from one point always goes through the same process of both building, breaking down, and then coming back into building, we're only looking at it at one piece in time. So the possibilities here are endless in terms of what can be made or what we can do with it, whether it's science, chemistry, and one of the things that we're going to talk about in the next two sessions, one of the two, is we're going to talk about water and its ability to remember. Ooh. And so I've been doing some really amazing research, and it's incredible how this these concepts have been sitting right in front of us all this time, and we didn't know it. So that's it for now. But anyway, everybody, it's good to be back. Mel, it's great to see you again. And now we're back on our normal. I keep saying that all the time. We didn't anticipate this one.